I'm Ivan Judson, Solution Architect at Harper, and I like to do these Friday things to share what I'm learning with you. I spend most of my time helping customers solve their problems. In the last few weeks, I've been showing you how to do the very basics of installing Harper and building sort of super simple applications. This week, I'm excited to share an actual system that we're building or a solution that we're building in conjunction with an existing customer to show you a real, live thing. So pull up a chair. Let's talk about what I've been building this week. I'm going to share my screen, but before I do that, I just want to go over the whiteboard for a second, and I want to share a little bit of a diagram of what we're going to talk about this week. So let me turn the lights off so there's no glare, and I will show you what we're doing. So the solution that we're working on is actually, in the broadest terms, a large enterprise has data that is being collected and pushed to BigQuery. It's collected from across their entire enterprise, shoved into a shared BigQuery instance with different tables and data sets. And then across the enterprise, they are given permission to subsets of that data, and they pull that data down back to the enterprise. And when they pull it down, they have to do a bunch of ETL work and a bunch of preparations, and then they make it available for internal use via other APIs. So here's a basic whiteboard diagram of how it works today and how we're going to build this with Harper. So you can see Google BigQuery sitting up here, and I'm using a simulated data set that is marine vessels sailing around the world, trudging around in the oceans. So you'll see boats and marine vessels and positions and things like that in the data. We've got Google BigQuery sitting up here. We've got a bunch of vessels that are pushing their data in real-time telemetry into that BigQuery table. We've got an on-prem job that starts the ETL process written in Golang that pulls the data from BigQuery and puts it into Redis. Once it's put into Redis, then it is pulled out and curated and managed and constructed so that it can be accessible through APIs. And then finally, the users can actually access those APIs down here at the bottom. You can see this is the current setup in black. That's the way it works. Now, what are we going to build in Harper? Well, we don't have actual vessels sailing around the world doing stuff. So what we do is we built a synthetic data generator. It will generate mock data that looks just like this so that we can shove it into BigQuery. And then we're going to stand up a Harper cluster. We're going to focus on one instance for this week. Would imagine that we have a cluster running in Fabric for next week or the week after. And within that cluster, we're going to have our single instance. Within that instance, we're going to write a little ingester, something that can pull the data from BigQuery and pull it into Harper. It's going to pull it in and put it in a table locally. That table then will be automatically exposed via REST, because we're going to configure the instance to do that. And that will deal with all of this part. So we're going to use a table instead of Redis, and we're going to use Harper's native REST interface instead of API management to expose the data. And then I'll show this entire system working. I'll share the GitHub repo, and we'll talk about in future versions, when we have multiple nodes running, what we have in the ingester is the ability to pull in parallel down to multiple instances and to use Harper's native replication to rationalize the fact that this only has stripe 1 and this only has stripe n. So then we can replicate all of those stripes along the cluster and have a full data set everywhere we need it. So that's what we're going to build now. Let me share my screen and take you through the process. Let me show you the code that we've got and how it's working. Now, you should see everything that's sitting here. I've got my code for my plugin sitting here. I wrote this as a plugin to Harper so that it can literally be installed, configured, and deployed in any Harper instance. It'll be available on GitHub, and it'll be something you should not only clone and build and configure and use, but you should improve and make pull requests so that this thing gets better with everyone that uses it, because it's a generic utility. So we've got the plugin. I'm running it in a skeleton app so that we can see it happening. I'm not going to pay attention to the skeleton app. I have got BigQuery open over here. I've got Fabric open in another tab. I've got Postman here because I've got a couple of things that are pretty interesting about the way this works. And I've got my shell, my terminal running here. So first things first, You can see this is me running my synthesizer, and I'm saying start. It's been configured with a BigQuery project data set and table, which you can see here. Project data set table. You can see the schema that it's sending. So I've got a report date, timestamp, a bunch of information about the vessel. And if we preview, you can see this data is populated. We're sitting here. We've got, well, how many do we have? We have about 28,000 of these that have populated in the last few minutes. So it's live, it's there, it's working. That is our generator. You can also see that this is, if I go to my README in the repo, I'll render it. You can see this is all part of the repo. So all I did was run this command. It's part of the repo. Once you npm install in the repo, you can actually run the synthesizer locally out of the plugin. So that's up and running. We've got it going. Data's flowing. Now, how do we get it to Harper? Well, what we've got is we've got a plugin, and you can see the plugin's configured with the same information. I have got in my schema, in my GraphQL, where I define my schema, I've got a BigQuery data table. That's where I'm going to dump the data that I pull down. I've got a sync checkpoint table and a sync audit table. We're not using the audit table right now, but the checkpoint table is what's used so that the ingester can batch the pull and come back and checkpoint. And if the thread that it's running in dies, it can restart. So it has a durability across catastrophic failures and a bunch of other stuff, which is really handy, and we can get into those details later. For now, I'm running my app here. You can see it up and running. I'll start this from scratch. So let me go over here, and in my dev instance, I will go to my databases. You can see I have the data table. I am going to drop the data table entirely. So I now have no data table. This is for the wrapper app. Now I'm going to come over here to where I have the wrapper app, and I'm going to run this again. And what you'll see is it does a bunch of initialization, and it creates these resources. BigQuery data is the REST interface to that table, so you can get at that table. If I go over here and I do a get on that table, I'm going to get nothing. There's nothing in the table yet. But if I go over here to this endpoint, sync control, and I send it an action start, if you watch that terminal window, what's going to happen is it immediately gets a start signal and it starts pulling data down, and you can see the data in the terminal. Now, I'll leave it running. There's no reason to stop it. It's just going to keep going. But now if I go over here to the REST endpoint and I do a get on that table, boom. Now I've got all of my data that I'm pulling down from BigQuery sitting here locally in Harper. And if I refresh my databases, if I refresh the page so that I refresh the entire thing, I have the data sitting here, and I've got data in the BigQuery table. Now you're going to wonder, why does that say only ID and nothing else? But I'm getting full data here. It's because I'm using something intrinsic to Harper that is a little bit non-obvious, but really useful. If you look at my schema, in my schema, all I've identified is one attribute, my ID. That's why this is showing up here. However, I'm querying and pulling all of the data records with all of the attributes, and I'm putting them into Harper, and they are in fact available in Harper with all the various pieces. So they're all there, which means the basics are there end to end. We've got an entirely running system. We've got a plugin that can be configured to talk to BigQuery, pull down data. It will stick it in this table. It's resilient against failures and checkpoints. It'll restart. It's batching it with configurable batches. It's got, if you look at the config.yaml, you can see we've got the synthesizer is configurable, but also the sync is configurable. We can do an initial batch size for sort of startup. We can do a catch up, like if I fail and I restart, what should my batch size be? to catch up to steady state. And then in steady state, we have that batch size. So we're just doing incrementals. Like imagine I've got 7 days of vessel data that I want to keep. I don't want to keep it forever. And so I might have to do a bunch of stuff when I first start to get all 7 days, but then it's going to come in with 1 day and retire a day. And so at that steady state where we're just losing and gaining a day at a time, I don't need a big effort. Validation is not implemented yet. You can ignore that, but retry is there. So we have the configured retry so that when we're running, things are working and it's up and going. Now, you should dig into the Harper documents. There's a ton of good value there. It's awesome. This project is exactly the kind of thing I want to share with you on Fridays because I'm learning so much in doing this. And I can share what I'm learning in doing this with all of you. So join Discord, connect on LinkedIn, follow Harper on LinkedIn, go to our GitHub repo, star the repo. You will be able to find this in GitHub soon, so you can fork it, do a bunch of stuff, make pull requests, whatever you want to do, follow along. I'm going to continue to improve this over the next few weeks. There's a few things in the README on the roadmap that are not implemented. First of all, obviously, running this on multiple Harper instances, leveraging that replication on the back end, running it in multiple threads per instance so that it can be super parallelized and it's super efficient. That's just back-end optimization to make this parallel and high performance. But right now, I'm also just selecting everything out of one table that's configured. So we'll expand that front-end configuration so that you can not only identify multiple tables you want to pull from, but you could select which columns out of which table you want to pull from. So it'll be effectively a complete solution for being able to pull data that you've got in BigQuery, only pull the data that you need down, and offer it via REST in very little code and extremely high performance implementation. It'll be living right in Harper. All right, that's what I got. I'm gonna say goodbye for now, but I just want to call out again, Dawson, Chris, Kyle, our entire ESS team that supports customers who have been helpful along the way. We've got an amazing group of people at Harper. You should follow everyone. Come to Discord, connect with us, tell us what you want to build, tell us what we can do to help. All right. So happy Friday. Don't forget, there's Fast and there's Harper Fast. I'll see you next week.